Hello again, it's Damon. It's Crazy Logics 007 on YouTube and Crazy Logics in most other places. Last we left off, I said I'd tack in the, I'd bolt the amp down into the heatsink and I'd tack those legs. And so I did, and I pulled it back out here, and looking at it, I can look where all my FET legs are, and they're all exactly the same height. You ain't going to be able to see that hardly. Yeah, if I turn it just like that, you kind of can. So what that tells me is that was laying nice and flat, and that it did end up good. So I'm happy with that. I know that that's going to lay nice and flat when I go to thermal compound it in and get it back in there. So we're going to go ahead and, I was going to start soldering this, but you know what we're actually going to do first? We're going to get a piece of paper towel. And we're going to lay this on here and get a screwdriver. We're going to get our deoxit. We're going to just shoot a little into each switch. Dribble a little of it on the top here, a little of it on the top. And these do not have access in the bottom, so I'm going to see about dribbling, just giving a little spray and dribble down, and then lean this back and dribble a little more on these shafts, trying to get some of that down in there. We're going to work it in. So then we're going to twist it, and you'll feel it when you finally get some in there, when it finally works its way, because suddenly it gets nice and lubricated, and now we're getting clean. And so it definitely, it's definitely something you can feel. It'll go from feeling mushy to getting lubricated and clean. You can see it was actually bubbling a little as I turned it up around there, so those slots did let that down in there good. And then we're going to work the switches back and forth, kind of put a little pressure on them. And these are stiff, so they probably really needed it. I'm going to leave it in the other position there. Slide this back and forth several times, and then while I shot it from one direction, shoot a little more in there, and we're going to call that good. And I will work these back and forth. You let that drip in there, make sure it's getting in there good. And that, you know, a lot of times pots are the only problem with an amp. Sometimes they're not even a problem at all. They don't, nothing's wrong with it. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe some of this off. And we'll slip the amp over here. We'll get some isopropyl alcohol. This is 91%. I just get it at Walmart. You can get it anywhere you get it cheap. And then I'm just going to go around the board here where I've oversprayed, and we're going to clean it off. That deoxit does leave a residue that's on purpose. It has some lubricant in it and some anti-oxidizing agent. It cleans oxidization, so it's actually helping clean this board. But we don't want to leave it all over everything, because exposed out here, it's just going to have dust settle on it and just look terrible and build up a layer of dust. And that's not what we want. So I go ahead and clean it back off the board here. It's not too terribly critical that it, you know, anywhere you kind of overspray, it's just nice to get it all cleaned off. Everybody likes a good looking clean board. Just a little clean here with the isopropyl. wiped off. So another cheaty way is I take my hot air gun and I just blow far away and it helps evaporate. There is 9% water in that isopropyl alcohol, so getting that all to evaporate is a good deal. Like clean all that up. So just a little heat like a hairdryer would work. Gotta be careful with those big heat guns. They put out a ton of heat, uncontrollable kind of and everything. Whereas my hot air rework station, it's got a narrower tip, I can hold it back. It's got all kinds of temperature control. I can turn it up and down. See, we got either deoxit back here, or we got a lot of isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to make sure this is all cleaned up. It's real important on these switches and stuff. All these things are exposed. Sometimes you have to use it on even the bias pots and stuff. You know, these were pretty well protected. This amp was pretty clean on the inside, not too awfully bad. But that's got that. So I'm trying to hurry here. Just trying to remember all the things to do. And let's go ahead and get these solder joints finished here. So I'll put it on the leg and put the solder to the leg and let that slide down and bond the joint. That way you know you've got adequate heat. Should make a pretty solder joint. It should flow through the other side a little bit too, down the via. That looks pretty good. Rubbing alcohol and remove some of that flux. That rubbing alcohol is acting like it's really watery for some reason. Let's dump that out. Now that we're not near plastic, we can actually wipe this out. Switch to a little acetone. I normally just do general cleaning with the isopropyl alcohol, and my final cleans are always with acetone. Unless it's around plastics, then you don't want to use acetone, because acetone is really tough on certain plastics and can melt it, and that is not good. You don't want to melt plastics. You need to test. If you've got to clean a plastic with acetone, you need to test in a inconspicuous spot that can be damaged. And that looks pretty good. And now we're going to set our multimeter to diode check. So we get a beep, and we're going to go leg to leg, leg to leg. And this is what I was talking about. This is checking for solder bridges. And so we don't have any solder bridges. Nothing went beep. So that's good. I'm going to go ahead, grab my toothbrush and give these a little bit of a scrub in between. I didn't quite get all that flux out of there. Solder is flux cord. And so I like cleaning up all the flux. I don't like having any flux left over. Man, you'll find flux on the bottom of cheaper amps just terrible, and some flux can be conductive after it ages for some time, and that can cause all kinds of stuff, problems. So we're soldered all in there. We need to do, let's see, let's go to the list. So I did solder, and oh, we're going to trim those. Solder and trim, it says. The factory ones were super cut short right along the edge, so I'm going to get my really good new nippers that I only use for trimming, and that's probably because it's real close to the heatsink edge. And I'm just going to trim these real close to the board, just like the factory did. Give those a look-see. Looks pretty good. So I got two pair of these. I got a junker pair that I use for everything, and then I got a good pair that I only use just for trimming legs, so that it does those in a real good way. So that's good. We've deoxed it. Clean that up. So we're getting close to mounting it up and everything. So one thing we're going to do is I take my little hook here and I bend the bias transistor back a little, and I give it a little more of a bend, and then I push it down real good and give it another little bend down, and that just makes a little more space, and sometimes it's hard to do. Give it a little bend over and give it a little more space with these legs so they're not touching, and get it pushed down in there. I'm going to do the same kind of here and here, and get this thing to really go in there, and then I give it a push down to bend it kind of almost back to where it was originally from the factory, but it's got that little bit of bend in it that gives it just a little height, and then when you push it, and that holds those down real well. And then I can when I'm happy with the way that turned out, I'll bring it up and I'll just give it a little shot of thermal paste. Probably should have done that before on this one. A little bit. And we're going ahead and seat that back down in there. That way we know that sucker's not touching. From the factory, it didn't have any thermal paste on it. They were just kind of close. I like them to have a little thermal conductivity. Even just a little bit. A lot of amps will. This one didn't. I'm not sure if maybe it'll, if because it's the big thermal mesh pad, it does a better job of transferring that to it, something like that. I just want to get those down to where I'm happy with it. Get thermal paste all over my hands and stuff. I'm just like a good, well, yeah, that's not bad. Work on that one a little more. There we go. So I'm pretty happy with that. So type in a little something, Rockford. Oh, my poor computer is so slow. recording. 100.4. And so double check. Okay, so supposedly from the factory, all the speaker terminals come out on that side. So if I do it this way, I always double check on an amp where it kind of looks like somebody's done some other stuff. It looks like somebody may have taken this one apart and shot some spray paint, and they may have got it in backwards, because you can on these amps. And so I always like to make sure it's back to the factory, even though I looked at it and you can make a little mark, and I actually took a picture with my phone, but I wanted to verify it with the internet. And it was speaker terminals on my right hand was the way I had seen it in my phone, but I wanted to make sure putting stuff together right. So we're going to go ahead and get a thin coat. Now, I've talked about thermal compound in my videos before, and how you don't need a super huge thick layer. And that's normally 100% true. I did need to make sure I set a caveat to that. A lot of these newer Rockfords that I've worked on have had a pretty rough heatsink casting. Much rougher than a lot of these older ones and stuff, where they're pretty dang smooth. And definitely a lot rougher than the extruded aluminum housings in other amps, you know, that you'll see. And so you can have to smear a little bit more on than just a super thin coating if that heatsink's casting is a bit rough. And all of Rockford's heatsinks have always been cast pretty much. They may have had a few extrusion ones, maybe in some Series 1s or something like that, but I don't count Prime and Series 1 amps as true Rockfords. They're a Rockford, but you know, that's their attempt to compete a bit in the cheaper market. And you know, I just really like the punch and the power series. That's what back whenever I first got into car audio, that's all there was punch and power. There was no such thing as Series 1 or Prime or anything. So now we're going to get thermal compound, a good glob of it. I need to get a little more out here. A good glob of it on these temperature sensors. There we go. Get these back in here really good, all the way down. There we go. And go ahead and stick these screws in. So I'm going to get them back in the board. Already installed and pulled these once, but make sure you don't cross thread nothing, because you are taking a carbon steel screw. If you have to back it around and feel, you are taking a carbon steel screw and a little aluminum. Super duper easy to cross thread. You don't want to be that guy. Okay. Man, I really should probably pause it right here and then do a second video, or edit a video in, because we are already at 20 minutes. I may cut a bunch of this out. I'll probably just keep recording and jump ahead, edit this out. Or maybe I'll do that fun fast forward thing. I don't know if I've said anything super important, and if I did, I'll maybe make note of it. It's a little tight. Where'd your screw go? If I didn't mention it before, I may have to mention it at the end of this fast forward segment if I'm fast forwarding it, but you need to tighten these from the middle out. I'm not 100% certain if I did that over here really well, so we'll double check. It's a little distracted. I think I did, but we'll see.